Welcome to Collaborwocky 12, Modus Institute's Conversations about Collaboration. Today we're talking with Dennis Benkert from Jimdo, and he's talking about how he collaborates in planning with the teams that he works with. And usually what happens is we turn our planning over to managers, to scrum masters or whatever, and they go off and they do our planning for us, and then we can come in and we can do some adjustments, maybe do some story points or some estimation, but ultimately other people are responsible for our planning. And we tend to therefore underplan. And then we're surprised when we get dependencies, or we run out of time, or we need to do something and the people that we need to do it with aren't around. So Dennis is going to talk to us about how they get around that by planning collaboratively. So welcome, Dennis. Do you want to tell people a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot. So I'm Dennis. I'm currently technical program manager at Jimdo. It's not super important. I've worked mostly in operations, but started in engineering, and that's like where I come from. And I'm responsible for making people collaborate with each other and like getting projects on started and everything. And there are sometimes in teams, sometimes across a couple of teams, and yeah, therefore it's a lot about how do we make decisions so that we can move projects forward. I think that's a good summary. Two things that I want to say. So like all the things that I'm about to show are because I believe in like I believe a lot of people can do project management without having to have a certificate or having a project manager per se at their disposal, because those are experts. You can get them and they can teach you some more things and like perfect some things which you're not really good in or where you struggle. But most of the things you can get done already when you follow some simple let's say some simple guidelines or some simple beliefs. And that is like both of you say, visualize everything. I put on top of this specifically visualize decisions that you make, and embrace the limits and boundaries that you have, because that keeps you honest with yourself, and you do something that Cal Newport calls facing the productivity dragon. But on a team level, it's actually amplified, I think, because for yourself, it's like you feel it because you feel stressed out when it's too much. But over a team, especially in a distributed world, it can become very invisible if you're overloading your team and if you're overloading yourself. And then it'll all seem fine, like in this little meme, like it's all fine and you have the burning fire behind you and nobody recognizes until people start to drain out or like timelines slip, whatever, right? So this is everything that I apply. And then it's because I'm like in a position where I lead groups, it's more about embrace moderation, and moderate groups through that, and like dare to do it because you get so much out of it. It's like if you're a team lead, for example, you get out of it some signals like who needs to be coached, and a specific thing about thinking about complexity. I mean, in our realms, then like what is Canadian, for example, for somebody to think about what is complex, what is complicated, what do these things mean? And you can see this because you can see them struggle while they're doing it. And you basically as a team lead, for example, or as a group lead, or anybody who actually is responsible for a group or for a group result, you get this out for free. You get signals basically for free. So prepare to take some notes. But that was more than I wanted to say. So let's get real and look at some visualizations. I spoke with both you about some tools that I use, which are based off also, or which are highly influenced by the things that you do on your platform. And I'm gonna walk you through this. So when we start projects, oftentimes it's about prioritizing and figuring out what do we want to do, what do we don't want to do. Not even talking about what are we capable of doing and what like time do we have available. Because first it's really about figuring out, well, what is it that we want to focus on, given the priorities that we know or given the priorities that we have. And I I take ideas, basically like visual ideas, and put them together on boards. That's what I often do, and use those to also show these little boundaries that I spoke about. So here you basically see Stephen Covey's jar with big rocks and sand. Then an analogy really is, you have a glass, you want to fill it. The big rocks are basically projects, like bigger projects that you want to do, while the sand represents little small tasks that you want to do. So if you fill up the glass with sand in the first place, you actually have no space to put any of the rocks in anymore. And you will still have like wiggle room in between, and therefore it doesn't fit. But what you do instead is doing something from a mental perspective to plan the big things first. So you put in the big rocks first into your glass, and then you fill up all the little space in between with the small tasks. So you do something that is maybe counterintuitive to a lot of people in the beginning. First, the big things that you really want to do, and then the small things. So here, for doing that, you basically have a glass. I put in 3 rocks in here, and this follows a bit like Jim Collins's one of Jim Collins's principles of, if you have more than 3 priorities, you actually have no priority at all. So therefore, it's a limit. It's like your whip limit that you often speak about in Kanban, on a similar, on a different level, but like limits. That's actually all what it's about for me. And I have this example here, and I said also visualize the decisions, right? So what we had here when we started was actually something like, looked actually something like this. On the left-hand side, we were ideating or bringing together in a group or in a meeting, or we gave people time beforehand to come with ideas and to put them on the board and figure out, okay, what are actually all the projects that we would like to do. And then we would make decisions of like fixing the library differences, for example, is something that we want to do in this quarter, in this example here. Publishing the first version is also something that we want to do, and setting up the infrastructure for the documentation as well. What happens to all the others? Because glass is full, we cannot get anything else in anymore. So we have to put it on the pile of rocks that we wouldn't do. And here you see, you have to make a decision. You have to decide. You only got space for 3. So how do you do that? How do you make that possible to decide on that? And then it's nice if you have that decision here, but you can go further with that, because now you get into a realm of now you have to get into a realm of project management, which is also pretty common, which is stakeholder management. Somebody needs to know that you're not able to do this, and multiple techniques about these that you can do. What I like is simple things that first visualize like your decision. So we can have another visualization for this, where we basically say, okay, these become our future rocks, and why we have to make a decision. Why don't we do them now? And who actually needs to know about this? So in the terms of this one, where we had where we had one here which said, okay, we're going to remove the old tool. In this example, we introduced a new tool for documentation, for documentation. And well, there's an old one that we need to replace. So why don't we remove the tool now already? You can do this with the team again, moderate it, like ask them, why don't we just remove it now? And then we came to conclusions. Well, we need it until we have the new one in place, so that we can do a migration. There's maybe content in there that's still there that needs to be migrated. We need to have it there until the old stuff is gone. And we need to get the new one ready first, because we have people depending on it. Okay, cool. That's a decision. At least we have it covered here now, and we can go on with other ones here as well. And one that I liked, for example, here was cleaning up a specific component. This was more for a design project. So when we clean up why don't we just clean up this component as well now? And then we can say, well, we can do it, but we want to have a stable setup first. And we're making a deliberate decision for that, which is good, like, because now you're starting to document it, you're starting to get clearer about it. People will start asking about it in the meeting if they don't understand it. You have to moderate it, yes, but that's the thing. You get for free. If somebody's not able to express that, you basically got a signal for free. this person is not able to like express that for like super clearly. Why is that maybe? And you get all these signals that you can use to grow your team as well if you do it that way. And then also who needs to know is another thing that we need to document. In this like example, we had Bob as the sponsor. So Bob as the sponsor needs to know, well, look, Bob, we're not going to remove the old tool again. We're gonna have to pay some costs, some more costs now because we operate with 2 tools. But we do this because of the following things that we figured out here. And this is the best reason we have so far. You can have a separate meeting with Bob, show it to him, and then he'll say, then he might also have some new input for that, which is a good thing because you force yourself to have a conversation which might end in a conflict, yes, but one that you better have now than 2 years out when the old tool is still there, it's not shut down, and you're gonna get asked a couple of uncomfortable questions because basically you're operating 2 tools which cost money. So that's like your first step, so to say, in terms of how do we actually figure out priorities for a bucket of time. Here it was a quarter. I think that's also important that you think about that. What's the bucket of time that we have? We're going to come to that in a more specific section as well afterwards. And you can go, once you decided those are the things that we want to do, like the ones, let's focus on the ones that are in the glass. You can go and define them out more. Usually 2 questions that you have to figure out. Well, how do we define it more? And I have 2 example questions here, like why do we need it? It's a common question in your teams, especially in teams where you want to empower the people to deliver something for you and come up with the ideas for themselves. It's like why? Like why do we want to do something here? It's we fixed the design library, or we fixed the library differences, the last ones that we had, to remove the last missing glitches that we had in there. Like, why do we want to do it? And the team basically comes up with this in the moderation. And what will it enable? Well, it will increase the ability to adopt it in all teams, because in that specific case, there were some glitches. Therefore, like some teams weren't actually adopting the library yet because they said, well, it's too off. And then that's our thing. That's our selling points to the teams. And in this case, who do we need for it is also another, that's the second question basically, because you get your first thinking juices going about who is it actually that we need to talk for this. And here we only have like this seems to be so self driven that the 2 people we had on the team, Sally and Mark, they could just do it themselves. But we also have another example of, because this is kind of an exploration exercise as well, of figuring out who actually are your interfaces that you have to work with outside of your team. And that's a good example here. So we had to set up a documentation infrastructure. The team was like, they pretty much knew, okay, we need it for a central platform, but there's also a thing like, how do we get this? Well, Mark can do it on his own, like setting all this up, but we need procurement first to actually get a sign off on the costs, right? And we need IT, for example, to include it into our infrastructure and to include it into our single sign-on setup and everything. So here comes also in when you have your whole team in, even like, let's say your managers and whatnot, they can pitch in as well. Well, you need procurement for that and you need IT for that. So because not everybody on your team can know every interface. And that's the collaborational part, which is in this case saved us time, because we figured out, oh, we actually need to kick off the procurement process now early enough, so that we have the answer early enough, because one of the managers could say, well, like you have to give them some time because they get a couple of requests. And so you start anticipating work from there. And here's a funny one that can help you if you're unsure who you need, or if you actually need help, if it's something that you can drive all by yourself within your team, or if you need external help. It's a little bit leaning towards the Dominator that both of you created, where we just made this exercise, like, how much do you fear it? How much do you think you're totally lost when you had to do it on your own? Like on the left-hand side, I'm like totally confident that I can do it totally on my own. And on the right-hand side, like, help me Ghostbusters, I don't know how to do it, right? So in this specific case, like, why? Then you can start asking like why questions a couple of times, like, why do you put it there? Like, not like in a leading question form of like, are you insane? But like from a perspective of, okay, cool, I want to understand, why did you put it there? Well, I don't know how to buy these things. I don't even have access to the credit card of the company, and good so. But then somebody can pitch in, oh yeah, actually you need procurement for that, or you need IT for that. So this simple visualization and letting people put something onto the scale enables you to have conversations of like, okay, why do you do this? Like, what makes you think you are in this position? Is it maybe because you just don't believe that you can do it, or is it because you're missing information that is there? And this is often useful when you want to figure out, is there something external, someone external that we need outside of our team? So I talked about rocks and how to define them more. And another thing is, because we want to fill that glass with sand, small tasks, is figuring out the sand. I represent this here as well, again, as like a little pile of sand and a little ladder. The ladder actually is just a mental exercise to force you into thinking in terms of stack ranking, because that makes it easier for the team afterwards to basically select. Like, first, we picked that one that we deemed from all the small things that we could do as the most important thing that we do the first time we get time for it, or the first thing we get time for it. And here, that's again, you have to visualize your decisions, because we had what typically teams start to do is do something like this. They put it on the same level, and then it's about, well, no, actually not. Like, you can make a decision, like why, for example, writing the project report, or if writing the project report is a little more important than fixing the glitch on a button component, or writing a nice announcement. Maybe writing a nice announcement is just great for the team morale. Yes, by all means, then do it. If writing the project report is important for a sponsor of the team or any stakeholder, okay, yeah, that's important. But you can make a decision with the team, like, we want to have the announcement first because we want to have some excitement. Then we can write a report which shows like, or which ties back to the nice announcement that we made. And then if we have some time, we fix like these little glitches in the buttons, because actually doing these two things first is more important to us than fixing that glitch in the button. And this could totally turn, like, when you do this in another time. There are some leftovers here, and that's on purpose. This, like, I designed it this way because I wanted to have a limit of 4 with the team, to just like ease into it. If you figure out with the team that you can have more, the easiest thing that you can just do, make the stickies a little smaller, and then magically more tickets fit into it. So you can play around with the visualization here as well. So, but sometimes it's nicer to have these visual boundaries and visual limits in there, I found, with teams, than writing down numbers. Like, you're only allowed to do 3, because that feels like a rule that can easily be broken. Like, oh yeah, then we just do 4 or 5. But if it's in a visual form, it's like more, it feels more like a boundary for teams. And then they can still start to question it, like, actually we feel like more, and they can still make them all slower. But there has to be this little burden that everybody would have to go over to change the visual now, to have a really good reason, in my opinion. Then when you have that, you can do things like figuring out your team, for example. And here, the kicker is actually figuring out and becoming clear about who's available when. So sometimes you work in teams where not everybody is 100% available, and 100% available here doesn't mean in time of like there's vacation or anything, but 100% available to the team, because you might be working in a team where you have something like a staff engineer or a like senior designer, which is only there for 2 days a week or something like this. And then you can start visualizing this here, because you figure out, oh, actually working with Sally is not, so she's not available all the time. So we better make those 20% count really well if we need her for the things that we figured out more on the top. And then you start realizing you jump back and forth because you have connected information here. And that's a bit on purpose. It's a bit messy on purpose because you have that information on all the boards. It's in a central place, but you can walk back and forth and make connections to all these things. And then comes like the final act, so to say. And I talked about the productivity dragon, and facing the productivity dragon really means is seeing your boundaries hurting in your face in front of you, so that you have to make decisions about how do I mix and match things around. So I have a smaller example here, and I prepared this a bit so that we can replay a situation, a fictional situation of how to do this. It's basically when you zoom out, it's a timeline, a little bit like a Gantt chart representation, not a real Gantt chart of like we connect everything, then we have a critical path and whatnot, or like a project plan where you have a critical path, but more like a, this is all these are here our big rocks, this is our sand, and we need to represent it on somewhere in the timeline where we want to do it. So it's not a contract. So I often tell teams, when you put it there, it's the best knowledge you have at the time that you have right now. If you throw it away afterwards and the timeline doesn't play out as you planned it, and we still achieve our goals, that's fine as well. Like nobody really, like, it's not super important to do it that way. And I also don't want to force teams here in, so other way around. I don't necessarily care if they do something like Kanban, Scrum, or whatever to fill this up, this timeline. It's more about the timeline and seeing the conflicts, and you're about to see that. We zoom in for 1 week. Let's say we have Sally here available on only a couple of days. Let's fix that here. Let's say we have Sally available only on a couple of days. And we said 20%, but actually turns out those 20% also mean, well, Sally's on vacation on a couple of days, and rightfully so, she should take vacation at times. And we have Dinah and Mark as well on the team. Both are available for the days that we have here. And we would say, actually, this here is better if I put it here. If we assume we start from day one, I got some information for you as soon as we get started. Well, actually, there's a public holiday on the first day. And actually, we have the quarterly planning on the other 2 days that follow by that, because we want to do some upfront planning. What you could have done now could have run into is this thing of doing something like, oh yeah, we're going to start on the first day. And then I say, well, we've got a public holiday. And they face the productivity dragon and have to say, oh, actually, you're right. Starting on the Monday is not very wise, because we are not ready yet, because we are all out, actually. And then another thing that you could do, or that you figure out, is, oh, we have the quarterly planning on the 2 days and we're all bound into it. Although we are available, we're actually not available. So, oh yeah, we actually have to start on the third day with the thing. And you see pushing out at the time, you get more realistic about what you want to do. And then we can get into other conflicts as well, where we could say, we have a broken down task here and that we want to place here. And then we would come to the conclusion, but we need Sally for that. And Sally's out on that day. Oh, actually, you're right, Sally's out on that day. Well, then we actually have to move it over here when Sally's back. Because once Sally's back, we can actually work with her on that specific broken down task. And you start to see the conflicts all the time. And yes, it hurts, because within a couple of moments, you actually realize, oh no, this is not working out. This is not working out. And you start going into this mode of, this is actually mixing and matching and figuring out who's available for what. And I'm like, I won't go too detailed into the example here, but what you will also see oftentimes is then the team pile up on one day, they pile up all things. And then you can say, well, piling it up on all on one day is actually not like, do you actually think that you can do this all on the same day? And actually one of your people that you have is also out on that day. And we have a public holiday coming up on the Monday. So are we comfortable that we do this? And then you can have these conversations around it. And then last example, you can fill these things up here as well with the sands that you have. And the sand you can like always use as like, oh, we see a little gap here, so we can do it here, or we are actually waiting for something. Let's say we would have a situation where we would be waiting for Sally and we couldn't continue, then we could move it into this week because that's actually the best use of our time. And yeah, was like a rough tour on everything that I wanted to talk about. But as you can see, to wrap it up, this is, you represent visually your work and your decisions that you have to make. You embrace the boundaries and the limits you have with your team and with yourself, because you only have so much time. And the more you get into this, the more you see how you moderate this, and the more you give people visual representations of the boundaries that they're dealing with, I figured that they start talking. And once they start talking, you have oftentimes in creative teams, these moments where they open up, where they say, oh, this is actually hard, or this is like, I cannot do this because I got this other thing here. And then they start making more collaborative decisions. And yeah, that's actually the whole thing.
The whole thing. So what I love about this, or I should say the overarching thing that I love about this, filled with a lot of big rocks and sand of loving about this. The container for my love of this is that this is a fully visible processing of a decision by a group of people. Mm-hmm. So from what can we do to exactly how are we going to do that? And every time, every one of these, there's questioning, are we doing the right thing in the right order for the right reasons? Every single board in this isn't just saying we've decided to do the things in this stack ranking and now we're going to schedule them. Every single thing is questioning the decisions to begin with, but in a way that doesn't require a bunch of extra work. It's just refinement. I love that.
I agree. I mean, one thing that's actually interesting is I was able to do this kind of planning with the team in, let me recall that correctly. Must have been 3 meetings of half an hour, where we just walked through a couple of things and then said, well, the timeline you're going to do yourself. Everybody does it themselves, and we'll figure out the rest once we sync back again. And then when we sync back, we had people seeing like, oh yeah, actually I put it here the wrong way, and this is actually conflicting. So you can make use of this synchronous and asynchronous decision making.
90 minutes is a very short period of time.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that made me smile, Dennis, is you said you created a visual representation of boundaries, compelling them to start talking and making more collaborative decisions. And I smiled because, when you think about Kanban and you think about the beneficial constraint in Kanban that promotes flow, what you've done is you've imposed that beneficial constraint to impose psychological flow. May not be process flow, but it's definitely psychological flow. And there's one thing that, having worked with you for almost 2 years, that I have come to associate with you is the term empathy. And not because you say the term, but I've watched you model it. And, that sense of understanding and being respectful of other people's feelings. And we know that stress and fear and overwhelm and a lack of clarity, they don't respect your empathy, right? We know that it's often the first thing that's impacted and is overridden by stress. And so managing that sense of overwhelm in our admittedly limited capacity by offloading our process, offloading our decision-making to a visualization it frees up that capacity. It depersonalizes issues about why we've made the decisions we've made and come to the conclusions that we made. And, and so now you come away with these brilliant artifacts. And my question is, do you ever revisit these visualizations with your teams to see how you came to certain decisions in the past?
I think that's actually one thing that we should do more, to be honest. Especially the timeline thing. So I said very optimistically, I don't necessarily care if the timeline plays out this way or another way. If you want to go full, let's say PDCA, for example, that's a really good opportunity for you to do this and to dive more into how do we actually do this with the breaking down the tasks and everything. That's the thing that I leave out on purpose here for now, because I found with the teams that I do, I often find teams that do like work breakdown or timelining or everything in different ways. And I don't want to come in and just say, well, you're all going to do now what I do with like how you do this. I want to see where they are, basically. So it's also a tool for me seeing, okay, where do we stand with this team? Like, is this team capable of doing that? Do they have problems? And then or can they just improve and not like, are they like close to the next, let's say, evolutionary step in things? And yes, this is actually, it's a good point. I've never done it before, but what I do is revisit the visuals. I tune them a bit towards the groups that I work with. This is more playful. So I'm not a designer, but this is, in my view, a little more playful than like other visualizations that you would do.
Well, I was thinking in the context of, we've been working and talking a lot about Obeyas and the value of a team Obeya. And often you'll see A3s in an Obeya. And for some people, I think that this is way more accessible and way more approachable than an A3. Not that I'm saying one is better than the other, but this is conveying a lot more information at a glance than an A3 ever could. So this is definitely something that I would love to see hanging in a team Obeya.
Here's a thing. Maybe I can also turn it around and ask questions for you. Maybe that's interesting. You've heard me talk about a lot of concepts that are like in books and everything, business books that are pretty popular. I don't mention them here in the board on purpose, and I reuse them in a little different twist on purpose as well, because I figured when you come in and say, we're going to do Stephen Covey's glass of rocks, people will start to obsess about, are we doing this right now? They all start looking afterwards. Is this how it's really done, TM? And then they do that, and then they don't focus on what we actually started to do, which was like make a decision for the business. Is that something that you see, that you experience as well? Because that's like an internal, or it's like a hidden thing here, that I do all these things with a twist without mentioning them, but you can see them if you know them.
So I see that even, so yes, with Covey, or with, personal Kanban or lean coffee or Kanban method or Scrum, but even in Jimdo, that happens now with, so Jimdo implemented, for those of you playing along at home, they implemented in their development group a 7-week planning cycle. And that 7-week planning cycle has now developed its own kind of craft, its own, we need to do this exactly this way or it doesn't work right. And so, yeah, one of the things that I really love about these visualizations is that they are a wonderful hodgepodge of Covey and Jim and Tony and Gantt and, just a bunch of different things. And we worry about that because when we try any idea, people want to do it right. And this is saying we have a goal. So doing it right means we've achieved our goal, not that we, danced somebody else's, we did the Lindy hop exactly as we were supposed to.
Mhm.
If I may,
Mhm.
the
Do it.
the each one of these boards has its own little bit of brilliance.
Thank you.
So if we could zoom in on the future rocks.
Yes.
Okay. So what
Absolutely.
I love about the future rocks is that there's two things happening in this board that never happen in business and are the cause of most of our waste. So the first is not making a decision.
Mhm.
So ordinarily what happens is you don't make a decision at all, or you do make a decision and then you don't know why. So all of these things that didn't happen, you run the risk of in the future, people say, you know what, I knew we should have removed that old tool then.
Mhm.
And you're like, let's remember why we didn't.
Mhm.
Then you go the extra step of saying, hey, when we don't do this, someone needs to know that that didn't happen for a
Mhm.
reason, because Bob is sitting over there going, man, they're going to remove that old tool and my life is going to be so much better. And then Bob keeps going to work and the old tool's not there. And then when he pings you on Slack and says, why is it still there? Somebody says, we decided not to do it.
Mhm.
And then Bob's like, well, I guess that you hate me then.
Yeah.
I love that about this. And it's so simple. And Bob can be a person, or Bob can be the support group or marketing or something else. Bob can be a person
Exactly.
or a team.
Exactly. I keep it open on purpose here because I grow to dislike the term stakeholder because it in my world it has a connotation of human being, a single human being that I need to talk to. But I figured from experience, it's more like an interface. And I'm an engineer, so I come with these terms oftentimes. And an interface for me can be a team, a function in the company, a person.
Yep.
But that's not like I don't make the distinction beforehand, because sometimes it's also that you need to let's say inform a whole organization, maybe that you do something, that you don't do something. Could be here, like let's say we enforce new versions, for example. If we play it the other way around, if we start enforcing a new version, it's actually a new process that we introduce, so the whole company might need to know about it, and then you can record it here. That's why I just frame it as who needs to know. So the wording here is actually sometimes, or the wording is oftentimes on purpose.
What I like about that is that, there's the org chart way of looking at an organization. And then there was kind of the big revelation that you could also have a social network view of an organization.
Yeah.
And what you're introducing here is a more open format object model of an organization, where there is information, that information can flow to certain objects that will process it in certain ways. And sometimes those are an individual actor. Sometimes those are a group of actors. Sometimes those are a temporary group of actors. I love that. So can we look at the next one?
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing that I will add, which is funny, if you like me, come into teams where you don't know the whole context sometimes, because I sometimes dip into teams and like I've never worked with them before. The funny thing that happens is that like there's some realization often going on when you visualize this, like, oh, we actually needed to talk to this team as well, and we actually should have done half a year ago already for all the things. So we found this out now. So it's also an exploration process that I've seen this a couple of times.
Yeah, that I think that shows really well on the decisions that we did make board, the next one, where you're starting to ask the questions, what problem are we trying to solve? And then in solving that, who does it impact? So what will it enable, and who do we need for it? That those two things together form kind of the collaborative framework of that particular task. And so asking that question, this thing right here, just this simple little visualization blows up dependencies.
Yeah.
All of those things would have been difficult dependencies, and you visualized them in probably 5 minutes, and now they're gone.
It's pretty it goes pretty fast. That's definitely true. One thing that I saw is sometimes it makes sense, given the priorities that you selected, is to reform the questions a bit. Like, who do we need for it? It's maybe the question that we start with, and then it's then you figure out, actually, this person is not 100% sold on that, but we need the person. Then you can introduce a new question: who do we need to sell on it to get the buy-in, for example? The other thing that I saw sometimes, which is really good as a realization, is that people realize, oh, we have all these people now that we need to talk to, and then they feel for the first time what kind of how hard it could be, what kind of network they have that they have to support and whatnot, and they sometimes get scared of this. That's what I see sometimes with group, but that's why I like to combine it with the moderation thing, because if you have somebody doing that, you can anticipate that and then say, look, this is great that you just found this and that you feel like this, because now we can, better we found it out now than we find it out in half a year, for example.
And when you do that the first time, it's kind of fun. When you do it the second time, it's kind of fun. And by the third time, people are starting to anticipate that that's part of their job.
Yeah.
And that no matter who you are on whatever team, whether it's in development or support or sales or whatever part of the company that you're in, the part of your job is to actually understand the context of your work so that you can do it effectively. Kind of user stories were developed at one point to even give a hint at this, but this is easier, in my mind, this is easier than user stories, and a lot deeper, a lot deeper. All right, so can we move over to I think the Doominator thing was next, right?
Yeah, this one here.
All right, so first off, I appreciate the choice of graphics.
It's like what happens when the 80s baby selects the graphics.
That's right, because no one before or after is going to know who that is. Ghostbusters, yeah, exactly. Everybody knows.
Johnny Bravo, different.
Yeah, there isn't a huge Johnny Bravo contingent in the world, but the beginning era of Cartoon Network rears its head. What I like about this is just like you said, it's super simple, it shows the group what they're going to end up really focusing on. So yes, these are all big rocks, but the big rock on the right is going to be granite, and the others are, porous.
We can do it ourselves. Exactly. Yes. Because if you go with the analogy from Stephen Covey, they actually turn into, I think he calls them pebbles. So they're a little smaller, they're not sand yet, but they're also they're not the largest rocks that you put in there, right? So you could even argue, when you do this, you figure out, oh, maybe we have room for another one that we pull in. I haven't come to this situation yet, but you could do this, where you then, when the team has, I'd say when the team builds the confidence, because that's actually what we're looking for here. The team is confident to make decisions. And then when they feel confident enough, you could say, oh, everything's on the left-hand side. Well, then we can try ourselves and pull something else in as well. And then we try 4 rocks this time.
Beautiful. All right, then there's one more before roadmap, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, the ladder one. So what I love about the ladder, which you're probably going to hate to hear, is I love that the ladder is so confusing, because no one ever climbs a ladder from the top.
No, I know.
So if you're climbing the ladder, you'd start with add Slack workflow. If you were
Alright,
descending the ladder, you would start
Yeah,
from the
it's
other
true.
direction.
It's
But
true.
what I like
I need
about
a
it,
rope.
yeah, it makes you have the questions about what are these for and what are these to.
True.
And so don't particularly care what's in that or what, because what happens next is you look at what happens when this stack rank thing meets reality.
Mhm.
And that's what I love about your calendar, is that your calendar does what both Agile and Kanban teams have a really hard time doing, which is recognizing that they live in a real world
Mhm.
that is governed by people's time.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So let's go over there, and we'll
Mhm.
is that what I love about this is, and you probably already get this, is that pink line. Sally's
Yeah.
not here, so we have to
Sally's not
wait and
here.
do certain things until Sally gets back, which
Mhm.
means that now, whether it's sand or whether it's a big rock, we're
Mhm.
setting things up now so that the internal team collaboration can best process that work.
Mhm.
That is, I wish that wasn't so interesting.
But that's the thing that I said in the beginning. I recognized a couple of times teams tend to run into this superhero mode of we can do it all, because it is so hard to see beyond your own border of what you're capable of doing, because you cannot keep 5 people's capabilities in your mind all the time. So you have to represent it in a sense in front of you, so that you see the limit, and it hurts visually so bad that you have no other reason than to talk about it.
Mhm.
And because it is so easy to just say, yeah, we're a team of 5, so therefore we can just pull it over. We can just do this in this week, and then you forget about all the vacation days that 3 out of 5 people took on the Friday. So actually, you don't have 5 people in that week, and it's so easy to just forget it when you don't see it in front of you. So that's the thing that I like to get out of people with this, that they realize, ooh, we actually work in a world of boundaries here.
Mhm.
And see them in front of us. And I mean, I didn't show some details here that you can also do. Like, let's say you have an all hands meeting, which is scheduled for half the day. You can even visualize this here and say, well, actually, we are all not going to work on that day for half the day. So let's not pretend that this is a normal day for everybody, right? Or regional holidays. If you work with distributed teams in different countries, you like immediately run into the problem of, well, actually there's a holiday in Denmark on that day. And I didn't know, because I cannot keep like 5 different country public holidays in my mind all the time.
Yeah, and also, even if you're in that country, holidays sneak up on us all the time. Like, oh no, next Wednesday is a holiday. So that happened this week with Monday. We had a lot of things scheduled, and then all of a sudden we realized that it was a holiday, and we just unfortunately had to kind of skip it.
So here's a funny thing, and it happens to me as well. I bet it happens to you as well. When we're in our daily grind of doing tasks, crushing things, and doing the work that we scheduled, it's pretty easy to forget about, oh, there's this and that coming up. And what I started doing for myself is, like, on a regular basis, I look out, what are the next 3 weeks are going to look like? And this here puts a team into that mental mode, so to say, of looking out, because everybody has to confront their own calendars, at least for that. And this is hard because people don't anticipate, like, people have to learn that they have to look up in their own calendars for things as well as they progress. I mean, nobody's going to get hurt if we forget one day here, but that's like training this group habit of, like, oh, I anticipate my calendar on a regular basis for at least as far as I know it so far, so that I get more realistic. That's an interesting thing that I see oftentimes, because, and it's not to blame people. It's really like, okay, cool. We just figured out that we need to learn this stuff as a group.
You know, there's a beautiful dichotomy here. I'm going to go meta for a second. So if you forgive me. you're talking about boundaries, and you're talking about finding a team's boundaries within the context of an exercise that arguably psychologically and creatively have no boundaries. So like, especially now, especially over the past 2.5 years living in an arguable and coping with an unsure world, people are looking at process religions, like we spoke about 2 boards ago, like we look at authors like Covey and Good to Great, and as authorities, as recipes promising an assurance and a standard outcome. And that gives people security, especially now. And that works great for making toast or a hard-boiled egg or a peanut butter sandwich. But when applied to teams and collaboration and collaborative decision-making, it prevents teams from situating a problem in their unique context. And that prevents them from questioning their path and their language and their assumptions. And so by not making these visualizations manifestations of somebody's idea, of Covey's idea, of Jim Allen's idea, of Agile's idea, it allows people that freedom to creatively explore possibilities to get to a solution. And I think that is the beauty in all of these visualizations that you've created.
So pulling you out of the meta level into this is the poor man's approach of like, this is how I got to this path without knowing your context. What I often say is we make this our own, because this is like, why should I use a prepackaged version of this for myself, where I have to do all these other things that I don't want to do right now. It's like, for me, this is now I can go meta as well for a second. For me, this is the purest form of the Agile Manifesto, where we put individuals and decisions over processes. Because yes, this book might say to me also that I need to, let's go with the glass. The analogy, the original analogy was rocks, pebbles, sand. So basically 3 categories of work. I figured for these teams, it was still fine to just talk about 2, because that's enough for us so far. Mm-hmm. And like taking that, making it as I just call it making it as our own, but it's like anticipating, there comes the coaching in again. Where does your team stand? What capabilities do we have so far? Do we actually need 3 categories right now? It's not super important. Let's just focus on what helps us now to make decisions to keep everybody confident. And then we can still mix and match from other things as well again.
So I would make a friendly amendment to what you said. So I think that you've done much better than the Agile Manifesto, because in individuals and interactions over processes and tools is people just talking to each other. What you have done is you have created processes and tools specifically to allow individuals to interact. So you have created individuals and interactions through processes and tools, and you created a tool that didn't have any religious affiliation with anything, which means that people can focus on the value of the tool. So I am so in support of you saying, we came up with the visualizations we needed to get our work done and to solve a specific problem or a specific need for information that we had. We were able to borrow from the good work of others, but we had to make that work in our context or for our teams. And if people can do that, then they will be then they will be truly agile, which means they will get beyond the limitations of the manifesto, and they will actually be really agile, which means we do the things we need to do in order to act with confidence. And I love that.
Thanks. I think what goes with that is this caveat, and maybe a slight warning that you have to give to people, is this is hard work. Coming up with these things, thinking about your team and where they stand is still hard work, because surprise out of the box solutions work like a lottery works. Like sometimes it works, sometimes it's not, sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. But like if you need to think about your team deeply to come up with these things and to come up with ideas and to try something sometimes. And often a lot of these things also, like we now talked for like over an hour how great all this works.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes I also ran with teams into situations where they said, this is not helping. Like, why are you confusing me? And why are you confusing me so much with this? And you have to go through this process as well with teams. So it's not free lunch. It cannot be. Nothing is free lunch, right? But I found the teams that really circled around this and where we figured these visualizations out were more believing in their plans than other teams that I worked with that just like were beaten over the head with like a Scrum process without them ever asking about if this is working or not. And I'm just using Scrum as a container for whatever.
Yeah. So that, and I mean, and that was the most interesting thing about one of the more recent experiences at Jimdo was that there were things created there, and even those very quickly became sacred. And we've seen that in many, many places where you come up with something that works fairly well. And because it works fairly well, people are like, oh, thank God I don't have to think about that anymore. But
to be fair, a lot of people don't know that they don't have the agency to question or don't know that they have the agency to question. And I think what these visualizations do is it invites them, it shows them you do in fact have that agency to question what it is that we're doing, to create a better process, to create a better outcome.
Yeah.
To create more fulfilled, make sure they're more fulfilled.
The interesting point that you make there is this. I don't know if this is my locality bias or not, because I only have my experience. But what I experienced is if you do this a couple of times, people get dull and they show you that it's boring for them, or they show you that it's not helping them in being checked out, not collaborating as they used to be. And those are the signals that I talked about. You get signals for free if you listen and if you watch your people doing it. And if you see that they're just doing it like whatever, it's a pretty good signal that maybe it's lived its time and now we need a change. I don't know if that's the right thing, but that's something that I saw and I've never like actually thought about it too deeply, but thanks.
I think it's 100% true that we get used to things, and then those things themselves can take away our agency,
and they make us blind.
Yeah, because again, we either think we've solved it or that everyone would get upset if we tried to change it. And I think one of the other things is that we've been sold that certain solutions work. And so we assume, okay, well, I'm doing personal Kanban or Scrumban or whatever, and now everything's going to be fine. And it's like, no, as our friend Alan Shalloway once said, you still have to use your brain. You still have to show up and think about your work. You can't just say, oh, Scrum's got it. So Dennis, this is awesome. There's so much for people to unpack here. And for you watching, thank you for sticking through to this hour of a program. But I think you can quickly see why this was so interesting to us. And
Dennis, if anybody wanted to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
Best is LinkedIn. So search me on LinkedIn. Dennis Benkert is my name. I bet you will link it. You will link or at least mention my name somewhere whenever. Yep. Like if you search me on LinkedIn, you're gonna find me. I'm not super keen on social media, but if you want to reach out, LinkedIn is a good place to reach out to me. And then yeah, that's a good place to start.
Thank you.
Awesome.
I should let you know you're more than welcome to come back anytime you would like. We loved having you on Collaborwocky. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever I have a topic, I'm happy to be here again.
Appreciate it. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.